This journey starts with the ancient Bronze Age communities and takes us all the way to the beacon-lit hilltop battles of medieval England. Rivington Pike was originally named using Old English terms. Rheof, combined with ing, refers to a rough or rugged hill, while pic signifies a pointed peak or eminence. The earliest recorded reference to the hill dates back to 1250, when it was called Winterhold Pike in a grant by Roger Rivington. The earliest records of Rivington, however, show the area was associated with a family called Rewington, later Rivington, stepbrothers of the Pilkingtons, who were granted the land in 1166. This suggests that the Rivington family may have been interconnected with the Pilkingtons long before the 13th century. By 1280, it had become known as Rune Pick, as mentioned in a grant from Cecily Roynton. Over the years, the name evolved, being recorded as Roving in 1325 and later Riven Pike around 1540. In 1577, cartographer Christopher Saxon marked it as Riven Pike Hill on his map. Bronze Age, before 1000 BCE. There have been discoveries of flint artifacts at Rivington Pike and the surrounding moorland, such as the Bronze Age Two Lads Cairn, which we will visit in a later part of the video. This indicates early human activity in the area. Flint chippings were found on the pike itself, and a flint spearhead was unearthed at the nearby waterfall known as Tiger's Clough. These artifacts are likely from Bronze Age communities, but flint usage is more commonly associated with earlier periods, such as the Neolithic, New Stone Age, and late Mesolithic, Middle Stone Age. However, flint tools were still used into the early Bronze Age, particularly for hunting, fishing, and domestic tasks. The people responsible for these artifacts would have been part of the Beaker culture, who are known for their use of both flint tools and early metalworking, particularly bronze. The Bell Beaker people arrived in Britain around 2500 BCE from mainland Europe, likely drawn by the island's rich resources and favourable climate. They brought with them advanced bronze metalworking skills and a distinct pottery style. Within just 100 years, they largely replaced the original Neolithic population, either through conquest, migration, or intermarriage, dramatically shifting the genetic makeup of the island. This rapid change has been linked to the spread of new technologies and cultural practices, marking the dawn of the British Bronze Age. In his 1904 book, Ferguson Irvine described a curious feature at the summit of the hill, which he referred to as a hog-backed mound. He acknowledged that while the hill is primarily a natural formation, there are clear signs that it has been modified, with parts of the approach being artificially steepened. Irvine also speculated that in prehistoric times, a standing stone may have once occupied the summit, adding to the area's ancient significance. A standing stone, also known as a menhir, is a large upright stone placed by ancient people, often for ceremonial or religious purposes. These stones are commonly found in prehistoric sites across Europe, particularly in areas like Britain and France. They were sometimes arranged in rows or circles, like at Stonehenge, and are thought to have been used for various rituals, but the Bell Beaker people and other cultures, possibly related to astronomy, territorial markers, or ancestral worship. Saxon period. The land around Rivington may have been held by a Saxon thane, possibly an ancestor of the de Rivington family. By around 800 BCE, a new wave of change began with the arrival of Iron Age Celtic tribes, who brought with them advances in iron technology, allowing them to create stronger weapons and tools. The Celts established themselves across much of Britain, forming tribal kingdoms such as Reged, Elmet, Gododin, and creating the early foundations of the culture we now associate with ancient Britain. Over time, the Celtic peoples would have settled throughout regions like Rivington, leaving behind hill forts, metalwork, Celtic art, language, and mythology. Fast forward to the 5th century AD, and another significant shift began to reshape the British Isles. With the collapse of Roman control, Anglo-Saxon tribes began arriving in England from the east, pushing westward into areas controlled by Celtic Britons. The Anglo-Saxons, a mix of Germanic tribes including the Angles, Saxons and Jutes, began to conquer and settle the lands once held by Celtic tribes like the Brigantes. These Germanic invaders slowly gained ground, and by the 6th century, they had pushed into the northern Celtic kingdom of Reged, ruled by Urien. Despite the fierce resistance from Reged and its rulers, the Anglo-Saxons eventually overtook these territories, establishing their own governance structures. A Saxon lord, known as a thane, was appointed to rule over areas like Rivington, starting a new chapter of control in Lancashire, which lasted around 300 years. Despite extensive research, the specific name of this lord has not been documented, leaving his identity a mystery in the region's early history. The de Rivington family, Norman Conquest and Post-Conquest, 1066–1200. This Saxon thane is believed to be an ancestor of the de Rivington family. The de Rivington family managed to survive the difficult times following the Norman conquest in 1066, including the devastating harrying of the north, led by William the Conqueror in response to persistent northern rebellions, was one of the most brutal and destructive events in England's history. Despite this devastation, the de Rivington family, also referred to as the de Roynton family, somehow endured these dark times, maintaining their lineage and eventually emerging as notable landholders. Their survival amidst the widespread destruction is indeed remarkable, given the scope of the campaign which left many parts of northern England barren for years. Saxon nobles who submitted early to William's rule were sometimes allowed to keep their lands or were granted new lands under Norman control. It is possible that the de Rivington family, being local landholders, chose to swear allegiance to William after witnessing the brutal consequences faced by those who resisted. This strategic decision could have spared them from the worst of the harrying and allowed them to maintain a level of local influence. Following the conquest, William confiscated vast estates and redistributed them to his Norman barons, such as Roger of Poitou, who held considerable lands in Lancashire by the time of the Domesday Book in 1086. It is likely that the de Rivington family became vassals under Roger of Poitou, serving him in exchange for protection and stability. Roger of Poitou, an influential Norman baron, would have needed to secure his control over the region, and incorporating local Saxon lords like the de Rivingtons into his power base may have been a way to do so. As local lords, the de Rivingtons might have continued overseeing their estates, but now under Norman rule, adapting to the new political landscape. Many Saxon families who survived the Norman conquest did so by adopting Norman customs, acting as administrators for their new overlords, and even Latinizing their names. The de Rivington family's evolution into the Norman nobility is reflected in their adoption of the name de Rivington or de Roynton, a Latinized form that suggests they embraced the identity of the new Anglo-Norman ruling class to secure their place in society. Norman Conquest and Post-Conquest, 1066–1200. In 1138, in response to the growing threat of Scottish invasions, the beacon system at Rivington Pike was established as part of a grand defensive strategy. This network of beacons was created, warning communities of impending danger from the north. Amidst the chaos of civil war in England, as King David I of Scotland launched brutal raids into Lancashire, Rivington Pike became the northernmost point in a chain of watchfires. Positioned high above the land, the beacon was not merely a signal, it was a symbol of urgency and survival. When lit, its flames would carry messages of war and alarm, igniting a series of signals stretching across the land, each fire blazing atop hilltops as a warning to prepare for battle. This network emerged in response to Scottish raids, particularly during the Great Raid of 1138, also known as the Battle of Clitheroe. This devastating raid occurred during the civil war between King Stephen and Empress Matilda, known as the Anarchy. During this chaotic period, King David I of Scotland sought to expand his territory into northern England, seizing the opportunity to raid vulnerable regions. His forces, a fierce mix of Scots, Norsemen and Galloway men, launched a brutal attack on Lancashire, where they overran a smaller English force near Clitheroe. It is believed that the attack took place near Clitheroe Castle, which would have been a strategic defensive point during that period. Clitheroe Castle, being a significant landmark and stronghold, makes it a logical location for such a battle, especially given its position overlooking the surrounding lands, which would have provided a defensive advantage for the English forces attempting to hold off the invaders. This devastation prompted a major reorganization of local defenses. Ranulph de Blundeville was one of the most powerful nobles in northern England at the time. After the raid, he helped to establish a beacon system to warn of future invasions. These beacons were placed on prominent hills or high points, with Rivington Pike being the northernmost in this network. The strategic placement allowed for signals to be passed quickly between beacons using fire or smoke. The system was simple but effective. Each beacon site would be manned, possibly by a watchman whose job was to stay vigilant for any signs of danger, either from the coast or inland. The position might have been referred to as a beacon keeper or watchman. When a threat, such as an approaching Scottish army or fleet, was spotted, the watchman would light a fire, usually a large bonfire. This fire could be seen from other beacon sites, triggering the lighting of their own fires, and so on, relaying the warning across the country at great speed. The fire would typically be fueled by wood or peat, materials that were readily available in the area. Beacon sites were prepared with large piles of these materials, ready to be lit at a moment's notice. While Rivington Pike was the northernmost beacon in this network, other nearby beacons would have included locations like Ashurst Beacon, near Wigan, Blackstone Edge, above Littleborough, and even further afield in Derbyshire, such as on the high moors of the Peak District. The Rivington Pike beacon system played a crucial role in 1588 during one of the most significant moments in British history, the approach of the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada, a fleet sent by King Philip II of Spain, aimed to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I and restore Catholic rule to Protestant England. This invasion was part of a conflict between Spain and England, charged by religious differences and competition over trade and colonization. Key figures: Lord Howard of Effingham, commander of the English fleet that would go on to face the Armada. Sir Francis Drake, a famous English sea captain, privateer, and vice admiral who played a significant role in the naval battles against the Armada. Queen Elizabeth I, the Protestant queen who had antagonized Catholic Spain by supporting the Dutch rebels in their fight against Spanish rule and encouraging English privateers to raid Spanish ships. King Philip II of Spain. A staunch Catholic, Philip was determined to bring England back into the Catholic fold. His marriage proposal to Elizabeth had been rejected, and tensions had grown since. As news of the Spanish Armada's approach reached England, the beacon system was activated as an early warning network. The system had been in place for centuries by now, but was reinvigorated for this crisis. Rivington Pike, being at the most northern part of this national defence network, would have been one of the first beacons lit to signal the threat. As the beacons were lit in 1588 to signal the approach of the Spanish Armada, the response across England would have been swift and urgent. The fiery signals blazing from hilltops like Rivington Pike triggered an immediate call to arms, igniting both fear and patriotism throughout the land. Local militias, made up of townsmen and farmers, quickly assembled, armed with whatever weapons were available: spears, halberds, longbows, and muskets. These citizen soldiers would have been mustered by local lords or military leaders, gathering in small units to defend their communities and prepare for invasion. England's navy, though outnumbered, was already at sea under the command of Lord Howard of Effingham and Sir Francis Drake, ready to intercept the Armada. Ships of the Royal Navy were equipped with superior long-range cannons, designed for hit-and-run tactics that could harass the larger, slower Spanish galleons. Cannons were positioned at key coastal defences and ports. Men who were trained in the use of heavy artillery, though fewer in number, would have been essential in defending strategic positions along the coastline and harbours. In coastal regions where the risk of invasion was highest, port towns like Plymouth and Portsmouth would have been fortified and swelled with volunteers eager to defend England's shores. Meanwhile, the countryside inland prepared for the worst, with men rallying under their regional banners, sharpening their blades, and readying themselves for battle. The sense of impending doom and fervent national pride led to a wave of volunteers, and as the beacons lit up across the land, the people of England prepared to stand firm against one of the greatest naval threats in their history. The English fleet, though smaller, had faster and more manoeuvrable ships compared to the larger, less agile Spanish galleons. After several days of skirmishes, and with the help of a powerful storm, often referred to as the Protestant wind, the Spanish Armada was decisively defeated, with many ships wrecked along the coasts of Scotland and Ireland as they tried to escape. This network of local defence forces, along with the Royal Navy, would prove instrumental in defeating the Spanish Armada, securing England's sovereignty and shaping its future as a rising global power. The defeat of the Spanish Armada changed English history forever. It cemented England's status as a major naval power and began the decline of Spain's dominance on the seas. The victory also boosted national pride and Queen Elizabeth I's reputation, strengthening the Protestant cause in England and across Europe. Rivington Pike was also part of the network during the Napoleonic Wars in the early 19th century, indicating its long-standing importance as a strategic defensive point. In the reign of Henry VIII, Leland describes the hill as "one part of the hill, when I saw it first, is called Fire-Rolka, but communally the people call it the Pike." He writes further to say there was a kopje in the hill, as a back standing up above the residue of the hill. The kopje was the site of the ancient beacon, forming a chain of signals. Leland is describing Rivington Pike's summit, calling it the Copper, which refers to the elevated ridge-like peak. He mentions that this part of the hill was the site of the ancient beacon, used as part of a chain of signals to warn of incoming threats. The kopje stood out prominently above the rest of the hill, making it a strategic location for the beacon system. By 1588, during the time of the Spanish Armada, and after the beacon system at Rivington Pike was activated, the land had shifted away from its early Anglo-Saxon roots. The Pilkington family had firmly established control of the Rivington estate through strategic marriages and alliances with the de Rivington family. The Pilkington family was well known across Lancashire by this time, having been one of the most powerful and influential families in the region for centuries. Sir Thomas Pilkington, a key figure within the family, served as High Sheriff of Lancashire and played a crucial role in the turbulent Wars of the Roses. The Pilkington family's influence in Rivington began with Alexander de Pilkington, who first held the estate in the 12th century. His descendants, such as Roger and Richard Pilkington, would further expand the family's holdings, cementing their power in the region. By the 16th century, the Pilkingtons controlled 5/8 of the Rivington estate, expressing their ongoing influence. The High Sheriff of Lancashire was an extremely powerful and influential figure in medieval England, with responsibilities that spanned from law enforcement to tax collection and military organisation. The role allowed the Pilkingtons to wield significant local power, which was why the position could lead to further alliances and strategic marriages, as was the case in Lancashire. A staunch supporter of the House of York, Sir Thomas fought alongside Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, decisive event that changed the course of English history. After Richard III's defeat at Bosworth, the victor was Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII, the first king of the Tudor dynasty. Sir Thomas and the Pilkington family faced severe repercussions. Their estates, including much of their land in Lancashire, were confiscated by the newly crowned Henry VII as punishment for their loyalty to Richard III. Despite losing control of their lands, the Pilkington name remained significant. The Pilkingtons, though having lost many of their estates after the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, retained significant control over the Rivington area. The family's junior branches, who continued to manage local estates, remained influential, even managing to survive through the post-Bosworth period and beyond. In 1508, a royal pardon was granted to the family, restoring some of their dignity and lands. Although Sir Thomas Pilkington himself perished in the Battle of Stoke in 1487, the family's legacy persisted. Their involvement in local governance, military efforts, and their ties to noble families ensured their continued prominence, even after the dramatic shifts in England's political landscape. 1733, the Rivington Pike Tower. The Rivington Pike Tower was built in 1732 as a hunting lodge during a land dispute between John Andrews and Shaw Whittles. Constructed primarily from gritstone, some of its materials were sourced from the earlier beacon system of Ranulph de Blundeville's 12th century system. Over time, the tower has been used for various purposes, from social gatherings to a fire beacon site. Now a Grade 2 listed building, it remains a significant historical landmark. Renovations in 1900 by W.H. Lever further highlighted its cultural value, and today it is central to local celebrations and events. Next time you stand atop Rivington Pike, take a moment to pause. You're not just enjoying the view, you're standing on a hill where Bronze Age people once hunted, where Saxons ruled, and where beacons were lit to warn of invasions. The ground beneath your feet carries the stories of countless generations, warriors, farmers, and families who shaped this land. As you look out, know that their resilience, their battles, and their triumphs live on in the landscape, and a part of their legacy now flows through you.